So water pollution remains a major problem in South Africa, with raw sewage flowing into rivers and dams daily. Last year, the SA Human Rights Commission said pollution in the Vaal River in particular was beyond acceptable levels for the 90 million people who rely on it for water. Activist group Save the Vaal Environment has blamed Rand Water for not fixing the sewage infrastructure. Let's get you some perspective on this story now. Adjunct Professor at Wits University, but that's Professor Mike Muller, joins us for more. Prof, it's great to have you with us on the show this morning, and this is by no means a new story at all. Give us a sense of how long this issue with pollution on the Vaal has been going.
Okay, yeah, good morning, Michelle, and to your viewers. I think it's important just to put this in context and understand that what the Human Rights Commission was talking about was the problems facing the residents of Mfuleni, Vereniging van der Bijl Park, Everton, Sebokeng, those places, where there really has been a problem of sewage flowing in the streets and flowing into the Vaal River. And that really is a disgrace and needs to be fixed. This does not mean, and I think it's very important for your viewers to understand, it doesn't mean that the whole Vaal River system is polluted. The water for Rand Water, for the whole of Gauteng and all the surrounding areas comes from the Vaal Dam, and that actually is not at the moment particularly polluted. And we shouldn't set up water quality scares. The water in Gauteng is perfectly safe coming from Rand Water.
Right.
Mfuleni is a different problem, where you have streams of sewage that have been running down the streets and actually through people's houses and past schools, in the open. That is a different problem, and that is still to be fixed. It's a complicated story of local government, and given that today is State Capture Day, it's also a large problem of local government instability as people sort of jockey for position and try and get their hands on resources.
Yeah.
But separate out Mfuleni and the Vaal River system, because I wouldn't want everyone in Gauteng to worry about whether they can drink their water or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for that clarity, Prof. We do appreciate it. So let's talk about the particular issues in Mfuleni at the moment. You know, how far do we trace those issues back, and how much of just routine maintenance is to blame for what residents there are experiencing?
I think that's the right question, Michelle, because this has been going on for an awfully long time, essentially since that municipality was established. And part of the problem, which we'll talk about the physical problem, but if you have a municipality where the mayors keep chopping and changing, where there's a lot of infighting between councillors within and between parties, you don't have strong leadership, you don't have clear policy and strategies, and while everyone is fighting in the council chamber, sewage pipes are being blocked, sewage pumps are breaking down and not being replaced. People's water bills aren't being paid, or the money isn't being collected. And where the money is collected, it's taken and used for something other than what it should be used for. So what we're talking about in Mfuleni is really a collapse of local government. And I think to their credit, the Human Rights Commission said that. Without strong local government leadership, you will not fix the problems of Mfuleni. And the difficulty is that now we've tried to bring in national organizations, Rand Water, which is the water board, and the Department of Water and Sanitation, and while they can try and fix some big things, they are not there every day and every night to run the system, to make sure that the pumps keep working, that the chemicals keep getting dosed, that leaks are fixed. And I think we depend on people living on the ground, working on the ground, to keep those local systems working.
So, Prof, according to the info that I have in front of me here, and you mentioned the issue of bringing Rand Water in as well to help with the issues in Mfuleni. So far, the Water and Sanitation Department has paid Rand Water about 100 million rand to track and to fix broken infrastructure. But as you say, they are not there as a permanent fixture when it comes to dealing with the issues in Mfuleni.
Well, you see, they're not there as a permanent fixture. And I mean, just to scare you a little about the numbers, the sort of 100 million here and there is actually probably just a drop in the ocean. I've seen estimates that have gone up to 6 billion rand to fix the sewage and wastewater treatment systems in that municipality and around, and also to get the water fixed. So you can't expect an organization whose job is to take water from Vaal Dam, treat it, and send it to the residents of Gauteng and around. That's what they are organized to do. That's what they are funded to do. They get the money by charging the municipalities, and usually the municipalities pay them, and they're able to then carry on pumping water. You can't now ask them to take on a whole new job fixing a wastewater treatment system until you can show them where the money is going to come from. And government can give a grant today or tomorrow, but in the end, the local government has two sources of funding. It has the equitable share, which it gets every month from national government, unconditional transfer of money, and it has its own revenue, which it must collect from the residents. And that is the money that must be used properly to run the sewage works. And then if they need to build something particular, they can get a grant from local government departments from COGTA, but they still have to show that if they build a new wastewater works, they'll be able to run it. And we haven't seen that happen yet.
So I'm glad you're on the issue of wastewater treatment plants, Prof, because it speaks to perhaps the biggest situation in the country, and I'm referring to a survey that was done towards the end of last year by AfriForum. The organization said it tested wastewater treatment works of 142 towns from May to August of last year. 122 of 142, they say, did not comply with minimum quality standards.
Yeah. No, that's correct, and that's what we are finding in Mfuleni is a small example of what's happening across the country. I do think, though, that we ought to understand, is this an absolute crisis, or is this just something which is unpleasant and uncomfortable, which we're going to have to live with for some time? And it's a good time to talk about it because, everyone is scared that the Vaal River will be irreparably damaged. Well, at the moment, the Vaal River is running nice and clean and it's being washed through by that, the lovely rain we had just before Christmas. Well, it wasn't so lovely if you were on holiday, but rivers replenish themselves. Rivers are renewable resources, and if they pollute it today and then there's a good flood tomorrow, it cleans out and you can start again. So we have to recognize that the first sanitation problem that municipalities have is to get rid of the wastewater from people's houses. We can't have sewage running down the streets, which was what was happening in Mfuleni. We need to take it somewhere where it can be treated. The question of treating it requires money, and it requires expertise, and it requires plant, and that has to be maintained and operated properly. And I think as South Africa, we have to have a very serious discussion about how we are going to pay to keep all of these systems running in a country where everyone wants a flush toilet, which one understands, but where we don't necessarily have the ability to treat that wastewater. And it means that quite often a lot of that wastewater is going to go into our rivers. And we don't want that to happen, but the reality is, and I referred to Zondo, he says we've sometimes got two universes. We have the universe in the law and the universe of what happens on the ground. And we do need to acknowledge that it's not going to be simply a matter of telling people, treat your sewage, and then it will happen, because the expertise, the money, and the infrastructure all needs to be put in place to make that happen. So, we've got a long-term challenge, which has to start with getting proper local government in place, disciplined local government in place, using the money it has carefully for what it's intended for.
Yeah, absolutely. And how ironic is it, Prof, that we're talking this morning just a day after the first part of the state capture report was released by Justice Raymond Zondo.
Yep.
Professor Mike Muller is Adjunct Professor at the University of Wits at School of Governance there, and he joins us to talk about a number of issues, but particularly water pollution in Emfuleni. He has clarified the issue around the Vaal River, which he says is very, very clean this morning. He doesn't want to alarm anyone. He says the people who depend on the Vaal for their water, some 19 million people. So that's an important story, of course, in particular as it relates to Emfuleni. You'll remember the stories of raw sewage running down the streets in front of people's doors, and it's certainly a story we'll keep tracking for you here on the channel.